Today I'm going to show you how to do a faux seam. So in this summery sweater that I am working, I decided to work it seamlessly, but I still want to add some structure and stability because that's kind of the purpose of seams. And in this case I decided to do a faux seam. I marked my single stitch that's going to act as my side seam, and now that I'm to the point where I'm going to divide for the underarms, I'm ready to do this faux seam. So I'm going to take this marker off and I'm going to actually drop this stitch off and get rid of that stitch marker too. I just slipped the stitches over so that I can do this without worrying about the working yarn. And now I'm just going to let this stitch run down. It should be comforting to see that it does take a little bit of work to make a stitch run all the way this way. Usually you're not just going to get it to run all the way to the bottom by just letting it sit somewhere. So if you ever do drop a stitch on accident, that should be pretty good. But there are a couple of reasons I decided to do this sweater seamlessly instead of with seams. I was doing stripes, so I didn't want to have to match the stripe side seams. And then I also did it that way because I was just kind of in a hurry. I wanted to be able to finish this without having any finishing. Okay, so now I'm almost to the bottom. I'm going to be very careful to get this last stitch and not the cast on edge. Because the cast on edge is very tricky if you do go ahead and drop that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to flip it over to the back side. And what I'm using is the Fix-A-Stitch tool to do my faux seam, but it's also great for repairing mistakes. And the technique I'm going to use is sort of a combination of a couple of different techniques I've seen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take two of the ladders from the next rows up, and I'm doing it on the wrong side, and I'm doing it knitwise so that I end up with a nice little braided seam on the inside. So I'm going to pull those two stitches through, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate my tool and then do the next two rows. So what this is doing is I'm picking up two rows at a time, so that's going to make them a little bit more sturdy, a little more linked. And then by rotating like this, I'm twisting the seam. So I'm adding just a little bit more structure and stability, and also it's taking up any extra slack. And I'll show you in a minute what it looks like on both sides. So here in the ribbing it's harder to see because it's right next to a couple of other stitches. So I'm just going to keep on going, and I'm going to pick up all the way up the piece that way. And when I get to the very top, all I've really got to do is pop the stitch, the top one, back onto the needles, and then I'm ready to work my row with my armhole bind-offs. So I'll get a little further into the solid here so you can see what that starts to look like. Now I've done 6 row stripes, so the other thing is it works out nicely with my OCD for three stitches for each 6 row section. So on the inside you get something that looks nice and neat like this. And I've already done the other one so you can see on the outside you get just a really slight seam area. Instead of doing it like a regular purl where it shows like on a purl outside, we've added the twist so that it's not quite as wide and it's not as loose. It's nice and snug. And on the inside, that side looks like this. And one of the things I did is once I got a little farther, you can tug on it in both ways, just like this piece I've done here. And it evens out the tension just a little bit. So there's a nice tip for when you want to avoid seams or finish up something a little faster. See you soon. Bye.